Hi guys, it's Angie with Fun Endeavors Tie-Dye Lab. Today let's make an autumn-themed mandala shirt using some hemostats. The shirt's been prepped like normal and I have it turned inside out. I'm going to begin by centering the shirt, and this process is going to go pretty fast, but down below in the description for this video, I have a link to another video which shows how to center a shirt. Essentially what I'm doing is getting both halves of the front of the shirt right up next to each other and both halves of the back of the shirt right up next to each other. That way whenever I apply the dye, both halves of the front of the shirt are going to look more similar, and the same thing for the back. Okay, now that the shirt is centered, it's time to start folding the mandala. I'm going to place the mandala both on the front of the shirt and on the back of the shirt. I'm using a washable marker, and I'm finding an area where I'd like to begin, or I would like for the center of the mandala to be. I'm going to use that washable marker and place a mark on my shirt where I'd like for that center to be. And I personally don't like to necessarily put it in the center of the shirt. I like it to be just a little bit higher, right below the armpit of the shirt. Then I'm going to place a straight edge on that mark, and I'm going to fold the shirt in half. I think the straight edge helps to keep some of the wrinkles out of the shirt, and it helps me get a nice crisp seam. Then I'm going to take the hem of the shirt and I'm going to fold it down, kind of like I was starting a paper airplane. Then I'm going to pinch the seam, lift the shirt up off the table, and when I do, that causes the top portion of the shirt to fold back. If you'll notice, as I'm going, I'm making sure I am smoothing out my shirt and keeping as many wrinkles out of it as I can. At this point, the part of the shirt that's facing me has quite a few different seams, or quite a few different folds. The side of the shirt that is faced away from me only has two, and the side that only has two folds is the side that I'm always working from. I'm going to grab one of those folds and fold it down. Then I'm going to flip the shirt over and do the same thing on the other side. Whenever you're folding mandalas, everything is symmetrical, so what you do to one side of the shirt, you want to do to the other side of the shirt. So right now I've folded an 8-point mandala. I'm going to use a washable marker and make myself a mark where I'd like for the mandala to end. You can't see it like from this camera angle, but I can tell where the neck of the shirt is by looking on the sides of the folds. I want to make sure that my mandala does not extend up to or beyond the neck of the shirt. For this particular shirt, I'm going to use straight hemostats, but you can use straight, you can use curved, you can use a combination of the two. It's really just up to you. The majority of the hemostats that I use on this design are 10-inch and 12-inch. This shirt is a size 3 extra large, so it's quite a bit of fabric, and the fabric is pretty thick. If I used smaller hemostats, I would have a little bit more difficulty getting them to clamp down properly on the fabric and getting the hemostats to not pop off the fabric. So I'm going to stick with my 10 and 12-inch hemostats for this shirt. If you'll notice too, I'm sorting my hemostats into pairs, and that's how I'm going to apply them to the shirt. If you've ever heard of an Otten Alien shirt, that's what I'm going to make. Patricia Otten is the one who came up with this design, and you can see a lot of her work out on a Facebook group called The Process of Ice Dyeing. She makes beautiful tie-dyes. Okay, so the first hemostat that I'm going to apply to the shirt is one that is smaller than a 10-inch. It's about an 8-inch hemostat, and I'm going to apply it at an angle at the very end of the shirt. Like I mentioned earlier, the hemostats can pop off the shirt. They are clamped down on quite a bit of fabric and can easily pop off. So when that happens, they can actually fly pretty far, and because they're pointed, they can be kind of dangerous. So a viewer suggested that I take rubber bands and wrap them around the handles of the hemostats. Well, I thought that was a brilliant idea. So I've been doing that lately, and it works great. I've had a few hemostats which have come or tried to pop, but they didn't actually pop off the shirt. They didn't really even move. I could just go and clamp them back down. So you're going to see me doing that as I apply hemostats. I'm going to be wrapping rubber bands around the handles. I've also taken and placed heat shrink tubing over the teeth of each of my hemostats. For the smaller pair at the end, the heat shrink tubing is white, so it's a little difficult to see. But for most of my hemostats, I use black heat shrink tubing. And I purchased that in the electrical department at either Lowe's or Home Depot, and place it over the teeth on each side of the hemostat, and then use a heat gun to shrink it to fit. This will help give me a tighter grip on the shirt, and it will also help keep the teeth of the hemostats from damaging the fabric. The hemostats won't rip any holes in the shirt. I'm starting with the smaller 10-inch hemostats, and I'm going to place them in pairs, kind of in a V. I'm going to alternate applying hemostats to either side of the shirt, and I'm only taking the hemostats about halfway onto the shirt. But remember, there's no wrong tie-dye. So if you want to put your hemostats further up on the shirt, if you want to add more hemostats, whatever you want to do, make it your own. Okay, I'm going to speed the video up a little bit, but I'm going to continue applying hemostats the same way I did these. And once I get to the point where the 10-inch hemostats aren't really clamping down, I'm going to switch over and start using 12-inch hemostats. Okay, so for the rest of the shirt, you can kind of do what you want to. You can either just leave it hanging where you don't have any design in it, or you can do what I'm doing, and I am going to place just a few really large folds in this portion of the shirt. Then I'm going to hold these folds in place with a couple rubber bands. Once I have it tied, I'm going to place it on a metal rack to allow it to dry out completely. I like to dye my thick folds like this when they're completely dry because I get better color saturation in the middle of the mandala. Otherwise, it's a little too damp and I can have white streaks in the middle. If you want more information about this, I have a blog post about why I like to dye my items when they're dry out on my website, and I have a link to my website down below in the description for this video. Okay, so the shirt is completely dry, and because it is, I'm gonna lightly spray the top of it with a soda ash solution. I've just taken my regular soda ash solution, placed it inside of a squirt bottle, and I'm gonna lightly mist the top. This is just gonna help the dye stick to the top of the fabric a little bit better. I'm going to do an autumn color palette for this shirt, so I've pulled mainly browns and oranges and reds with a couple yellows thrown in there. I've pulled a lot of different colors because I have quite a few different sections on the shirt where I need to add dye. If you don't have all these colors, just feel free to substitute with some other ones that you have. Like I said, that's the fun part about tie-dye, is you get to make it your own. I'm going to start by applying the dye to the sections that were formed by the hemostats. I'm starting down at the very end and I'm applying Daffodil from Dharma Trading Company. Then I'm going to work my way up the shirt kind of in the same order in which I applied the hemostats. So the next color I'm using is Sultry from Dye Spin, and that's one of the Dark Horse dyes. If you go out to Dye Spin and you're looking through their regular dyes, they don't have that color there, but they do have another tab specifically for the Dark Horse dyes. The next color is Amber Waves from Dharma Trading Company, followed by Pagoda Red from Dharma, Rust Orange from Dharma, And the rust orange is a special order color. You probably can't buy it from Dharma anymore unless you buy in really large quantities. But I have a link down below in the description for this video for a Facebook group called Tie-Dye Supplies Marketplace. And people in that group purchase these dyes in the large quantities from Dharma, and then they repackage them down in smaller quantities, and you can usually buy a smaller quantity from them. Then Turkey Red from Pro Chemical and Dye, and Barn Red from Pro Chemical and Dye. If you'll notice, I don't have my ice barrier around the shirt yet. I'm going to add that later. Now that I'm finished with the sections, I'm going to go ahead and apply the dye in between the different sections. And if you'll notice, it's kind of a zigzag pattern. So one part of the zigzag, I'm going to do one color, the other part I'm going to do another color. So here are the colors in the order that I applied them to the shirt. I used Camel from Pro Chemical and Dye, Winter Wren from Dye Spin, Wet Sands from Dharma, and Wet Sands is another one of the Dharma special order colors, Bronze from Dharma, Saddle Leather from Dye Spin, Desert Storm from Happy Cat Tie-Dye, and Oxblood Red from Dharma. The Oxblood Red is the color that I put starting at the top next to the hemostats and brought that color all the way down the shirt, kind of ending this portion of the shirt. Now that I've applied the dye to the mandala portion of the shirt, I'm going to go ahead and make myself an ice barrier. You can do this in whatever order you want to. Many times I go ahead and apply the ice barrier before I apply the dye. But sometimes it's a little difficult for me to see exactly where to apply the dye when I have the ice barrier around the shirt. Especially since I'm filming, I don't want to get my head in the way trying to see my different sections. Making an ice barrier for this shirt is kind of a challenge. I can't really wrap my silicone cake molds around the shirt, so what I'm doing instead is I'm placing them in between the different hemostats and then using a wooden clothespin to clip the silicone cake molds together. That way they don't fall through the slats of my metal rack. Then for the remaining portion of the shirt, I am just going to wrap the silicone cake molds around that portion of the shirt and hold them up close to the shirt using some wooden clothespins that I'm going to attach to the metal rack. The other portion of the shirt is really tall, so the silicone cake molds are almost the same height as that portion of the shirt. Okay, so on this portion of the shirt, I'm going to apply the dye in stripes, and I'm starting right down the middle with Wandwood from Happy Cat Tie-Dye. Then I'm going to use Mocha from Pro Chemical and Dye, and then I'm going to use some of the other colors that I used further up in the mandala. I'm using Wet Sands from Dharma, Sultry from Dye Spin, and Rust Orange from Dharma. Now I'm going to add an additional sprinkle of dry soda ash over the top of the dye and apply the ice. Once I have the ice on the shirt, I'm going to take my metal rack and place one end of the metal rack down inside of the plastic tub or tote. I'm going to leave the other end hanging over the edge, which is going to place the shirt at an incline and cause the dye to flow down the shirt. I'm going to do a little bit of touch-up of my ice as well. Then I'm going to place this container aside and allow the ice to melt. Since the shirt is pretty thick, I went ahead and added a second layer of ice once the first layer of ice melted. Then after the second layer of ice melted, I went ahead and allowed the shirt to process for about 48 hours before I began rinsing it out. To rinse the shirt, I took it to my utility sink and I began rinsing it in cold water to rinse out the soda ash. After rinsing in cold water, I went ahead and took the hemostats off the shirt and warmed the water to hot and continued rinsing in hot water to rinse out the excess dye that didn't bond with the fabric. Instead of continuing to rinse until the water was running clear, I went ahead and soaked the shirt. I placed it inside of my utility sink, added some really hot water, a little bit of Blue Dawn dish detergent, and allowed the shirt to soak. When the water cooled off, I changed it out and I continued that soaking process until my water was remaining almost clear. Then I put the shirt along with some Dharma's professional textile detergent into my washing machine and I washed it using a hot water cycle. If you'd like a little bit more information about my rinsing process, I have a blog post about that out on my website as well. Okay, so now the shirt has been washed and dried, and let's see what it looks like. Okay, so what do you guys think? I think this one looks really cool. I like all of the oranges and reds mixed with the browns. I think my two yellow colors kind of got a little bit lost, but that's okay because I think it turned out really pretty. I definitely think it has an autumn feel to it, which is what I was going for. And I really like the dye movement. You can see where it kind of flows away from the center mandala. So if I wouldn't have put the additional folds in the outer portion of the shirt, you would have just had that dye flow that is coming from that center portion of the mandala flowing down the shirt. You can see right around the edge of the shirt, there's almost like a little, I don't know, like a line that has a little additional design in that outer portion. And that additional design is coming from the extra folds that I placed in the shirt. I do love the dye flow though, so it would have looked really pretty even if I wouldn't have put those additional folds in the shirt. So I got all the way done with the shirt, got it rinsed out, and I noticed that it has a hole in it. I had pulled this shirt and was going to do a design on it, soaked it in soda ash, went to tie it, noticed it had a hole, put it aside, kind of forgot about it, went on vacation, got really busy, lost track of what happened to the shirt, saw it sitting over there and thought, oh, let me just do this shirt. Well, shoot, it was the one that had the hole in it. So I think the shirt is too pretty to just throw away, even though it has a hole in it. So my mom is really good at fixing things like this. So she's going to fix the hole in the shirt for me, and then I'll just sell it at a discounted price. You won't be able to notice it, and because the shirt is so dark, it doesn't stand out that much. I also noticed when I photographed this shirt that the front side looks maybe just a little bit lighter than the back side. And you don't notice that when you're looking at the shirt in person. But because I centered the shirt, even though the front side may be a little bit lighter than the back, the front side looks the same. So like both halves of the front of the shirt look the same. That's because the shirt was centered. It's the same thing with the back of the shirt. Both halves of the back of the shirt look the same. If I hadn't centered the shirt, I would have probably had the lightness of one half of the front of the shirt on the back and the darkness of one half of the back of the shirt on the front. So the shirt would have looked a little bit odd with half of the front of the shirt being light and half of the front of the shirt being dark, and the same thing for the back. I hope that kind of illustrates a little bit better why centering the shirt is pretty important, especially with really thick designs like this. So I really like this shirt. I think it turned out looking beautiful, but what do you guys think? Please drop me some comments down below and let me know. And if you've enjoyed watching the video, I sure would appreciate it if you would like it and if you'd subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'll hit the bell, you'll receive a notification whenever I upload a new video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.